Welcome to Meet the Thought Leader with Katrina Rogers Consulting. Hi there, everyone, and welcome to Meet the Thought Leader on Thinking Cat. I'm your host, Katrina Rogers, and today we are meeting MedTech, digital health, wearables, and regulated health tech expert, Blythe Karow. With more than 20 years of experience, Blythe advises CEOs, investors, and executive teams on developing strategies and product roadmaps in multi-billion-dollar markets, aligning long-term vision with optimal product pipelines, accelerating U.S. market entry, evaluating investment opportunities, and driving growth through strategic partnerships and M&A. She shares top advice in her Substack, The Device Files, and she's the perfect thought leader to help us dive into the current state of the medtech ecosystem. But first, here's a quick message from our sponsor. I work daily to bring you new insights and to help life science entrepreneurs and their advisors break through obstacles to get their innovative medical products from bench to bedside. Please help me to help you by subscribing to and sharing the Thinking Cat newsletter. Thank you for joining us today, Blythe.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, let's get started by having you tell us all about your background and how you became an expert on medtech, digital health, and wearables.
Well, so I started out as a lowly biomedical engineer at Johns Hopkins and actually thought I wanted to do research. My grandfather had been a research pharmacist. His name was Dr. Blythe, that's who I'm named after. And I realized in my first summer internship in a lab that I was absolutely horrible at research. I found it very boring. But while a lot of my classmates were very book smart, I seemed to have a grasp on more of the street smarts and understanding the customer needs, all the different stakeholders, what the doctor's looking for, what the patient is looking for. And my first internship at Medtronic, I really asked them to give me an intro more into the product management and product launch side of things. And I was lucky enough to be there during the first cardiac resynchronization device being launched. And so that really solidified my interest more on the product side of things. And so my career really has been over 20 years, almost 25 years now, in getting products to market or relaunching them once they're in market. I have launched or relaunched over 20 products at this point. I've worked for Medtronic, J&J, Boston Scientific, and also some smaller companies. I've worked in everything from wound healing to women's health to mental health. And I founded my own medical device startup in 2018 that I led from initial IP to breakthrough device designation in 3 years. We had a wearable neurostim for the treatment of PTSD and ended up execution finalist and medtech innovator. And in 2022, I rolled out of Everin, and ever since then, I've been doing strategic advisory and fractional executive work for a variety of medical device, wearable, and incubator companies.
Perfect. Well, that makes a great background for your work on the device files. And I want to say, I think the next question I have for you is your social media has really blown up over your series examining the FDA warning letter sent to Whoop Inc. over their claims for the blood pressure insights feature on their wellness products. Now, I'll refer our listeners to your Substack feed for the full download, but could you give us a little summary?
Yes, and maybe a little bit of background is needed as well. So the FDA sent a warning letter to Whoop, I believe in June, and it was really a culmination of some conversations they had already been having around the fact that the FDA believes that Whoop is advertising blood pressure insights that are medical device features. And the CEO of Whoop has been very clear in the fact that they're going to fight this and they don't believe they should count as a medical device. We still don't know how that's going to play out, but I did post a link for people. If they are connected to me on LinkedIn, you can go and vote on which way you think that's going to go. It's free betting. It's not real money. The odds are not looking good for Whoop at the moment. But I ended up writing the series because I actually in 2022 seriously contemplated getting a PhD from my business school alma mater, UVA. They had a special program on ethics and entrepreneurship. And having been in the world of wearables and seeing what was getting funded and what wasn't getting funded, I don't blame investors, but you kind of have investors who focus in different areas and they drive different outcomes. And you have medical device investors who are just not comfortable with direct to consumer go to market. And so anything that doesn't have a pre-established reimbursement pathway, they don't touch it. They're too scared of it. It's too much risk for them. And the people on the consumer electronics side, they don't understand the regulatory pathway of a medical device, and that's too much risk for them. And so what you end up seeing funded in the world of wearables are things that try to stay out of the medical device pathway. Well, now we're starting to see a shift where the users are wanting and demanding more and more medical device type features as we move into the world of the quantified self and people are trying to be proactive about their health. And so that's where you see Whoop bumping into that. And so I did a deep dive into Whoop itself and that specific FDA letter, but I also compared it to the history of what happened with Owlet, because they came out as a non-medical device and then got dinged and what happened with them. And they're at the same time as Whoop got their FDA letter, there was a company from Switzerland that got clearance from the FDA for a very similar feature that Whoop was trying to market without getting the FDA clearance. And so that ended up delving into the world of how we can get investors comfortable with this new world of wearables. I think that clinical validation and a regulatory pathway is going to be the new moat when it comes to how we see investment in wearables moving forward.
I know certainly that many of the investors that I talk to, the serious investors in life sciences and in med tech, they are looking for that. They're looking for that to be part of their strategy. And listeners, I will put the URL for that warning letter in this article for our reference in the text that's accompanying this. And then, of course, we'll also have the link to Blythe's Substack so that you can read the whole thing. So let's go on to our next question. Let's talk a little bit about the risk of direct-to-consumer health wearables and what's a good balance between that innovation and funders. What's good? What do we think is maybe a better path than this sort of fight between the two ends of the spectrum?
I definitely do not fault wearable companies like Whoop and Aura for going out as non-medical devices, and they certainly did start in the wellness space. They were perfectly allowed to do that. I think really where we've seen issues is more on the medical device side. We've seen a lot of people with the right medical device background not getting the funding they need to get to the right place because they were trying to go down the medical device path. And when you have wearables, a lot of them now they're collecting biomarkers and they're doing some sort of diagnostic based on machine learning algorithms on data that they're collecting on those devices. And the way the FDA is set up right now, you can't get clearance unless all your data has been collected on that device. And you need tens of thousands of data points in order to develop those algorithms. So it's very, very hard for a wearable to be completely developed from scratch and get where it needs to go. So I think we're going to start seeing partnerships that can really, move things forward, where if more Whoops and Auras and Samsungs will allow people to use their devices to develop their algorithms, then you'll start to see a loop that feeds back in. Where I get nervous is, like Whoop just announced that they are going to let people send in and do all sorts of blood testing to connect that into their ecosystem, which on one hand, I'm super excited. I want to sign up for something like that and see where it goes. But they have said nothing about how they're protecting our data. Right. And that's where I get worried. It's the same thing about the article I wrote around ChatGPT starting to diagnose things. And on one hand, the CEO says, don't put any personal data in there. And then he'll do a launch and say, here's someone that helped diagnose XYZ by putting their information into ChatGPT. So they're selling the features and then also warning about the risk at the same time. And it's just not tenable, I think.
No, I think your point about kind of the ethics in this space is I think really important. And it's a conversation that we really need to have. You've also written very eloquently about how the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, CMS, is killing breakthrough medical device innovation. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
It's just all still connected to my experience in the world of wearables. We don't have the same pathways to reimbursement that pharma has. If there's a new pharmaceutical drug, one, pharma drugs are just funded completely differently from medical device. They get billions of dollars to get to market, in medical devices, especially if they're wearables. They get single digit millions, right? And so it's just not the same thing at all. And a pharma, a drug in pharma can get to market fairly quickly once they get cleared or approved by the FDA. And a medical device, on average, if they're looking at new pathway, they're looking at 5.7 years to get to market. And so it's too much time for them to try and be supporting a company that's not making money. And so, and CMS has not been proactive about trying to help with that at all. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, they've been very anti medical device. And so, it delved, if you think I'm being political, sorry, but we've seen differences in the different administrations. And in the first Trump administration, they did an executive order to try and get breakthrough medical devices funded by CMS automatically for 4 years. And CMS was very uncomfortable with that. They slow walked it to the next administration. And the next administration, not surprisingly, killed most of the executive orders. And they went back to the drawing board on it. And then when it came back out, the new version is so unhelpful that it's been around now for, I think, a year and a half, and not a single device has gotten coverage under that. So we see that fewer than 15% of breakthrough devices, and when you say breakthrough device, this is a device that the FDA has evaluated a submission. In that submission, they included clinical data that showed that they can treat a chronically debilitating or life-threatening condition better than the current standard of care. They've already submitted this data to the FDA, and the FDA says yes. That doesn't mean they've been cleared yet, but only about less than 15% of the devices that have gotten breakthrough device designation are being sold on the market today. And that's because the investors know that most of those breakthroughs do not have established reimbursement codes, and that pathway is going to be 6, maybe 8 years to get there, and they just can't afford it. It's too risky.
Very much so. And thanks. So I think you mentioned some work on trying to correct the situation. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. So now, instead of another executive order, thank goodness, it looks like we're seeing bipartisan support in Congress and the Senate to try and move this forward. So I'm going to forget some of the details now, but there is a law right now that is in 2 committees on the Congress side and is in 1 committee on the Senate side. It has already made it through one of the committees. And so it looks like it's going to move forward. Fingers crossed. In my article, I told people how they can reach out to their representatives and show a little bit of support there, because we really need to help some of these newer medical devices. You still see the old implantable surgical tools with pathways. But when it comes to this new world of wearable technology, a lot of neurostim, those things are just not getting where they need to go.
Absolutely. Well, and I appreciate that. And listeners, I will make sure to look up those House resolution and Senate bills and include them in the text material with this interview so that you'll have that. I can say I did use democracy.io to let my senators know about the bills so that they could follow up on them.
Nice.
So let's wrap up our conversation then by having you tell us what you are excited about, what you're currently working on.
Well, for the device files on Substack, I've got a few things in the works. We're officially kicking off a premium tier where we're going to be providing some playbooks. The first one is going to be around reimbursement. We'll see what else we start adding to that. And we'll be looking into a few different topic areas. We've got the CMS stuff. FDA has a new program called the TAP program that can help newer devices figure out how to navigate reimbursement. So I'll be doing a deep dive into that. We'll be looking around cybersecurity on all the wearables and biomarkers that we're collecting, a little bit more on navigating reimbursement and looking into hot spaces like robotics and women's health. And on the Karow advisory group side, I've got a few projects that are still in stealth mode at the moment. It probably won't surprise people that after I did a deep dive into wearable blood pressure, I had a few different blood pressure companies reach out to me. And I'm also working on a really interesting cardiovascular technology that I'm pretty excited about. I'm happy to talk to people about when I might have availability moving forward as well. And if anybody is looking to connect face to face, I'll be at BioFlorida this fall. And then in Europe, I will be in November at Frontiers Health and MedTech Malta.
Excellent. And then I'll also put your information in the text that's accompanying this interview so that folks can reach out to you directly.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Blythe, thank you for sharing your expertise with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Perfect. Well, listeners, Blythe will join me on the Thinking Cat Chat 1 week from Friday. Don't miss your chance to ask her your medtech questions and to get into a controversial talk about some of the things she's put forward. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tips on navigating the life science industry.